And as the author, we have a noted architect, Mr. Christopher Benninger with us, and he'll be in conversation with Rima Hooja ji and Savita Raje ji. मैं चाहूँगा तालियों से उनका हम स्वागत करें इस मंच पे. Professor Christopher Charles Benninger is one of India's highly decorated architects, having won the Indian Institute of Architects Annual Award for Excellence 6 times more than any other architect. That calls for an applause, I believe. His well-known award-winning projects are Mahindra United World College of India, the Samudra Institute of Maritime Studies near Mumbai, the Suzlon One Earth World Headquarters in Pune, India, the National Ceremonial Plaza and the Supreme Court at Thimphu, Bhutan, the Indian Institute of Management in Kolkata, and his own studio and residence, India House in Pune, and the list goes on and on and on. Please welcome him with a round of applause. I would request the volunteers to please inform Mr. Christopher to be here.
Can I just use that
Yes.
for a minute?
Sure, ma'am.
So a lot of students from Bhopal have gone to take a picture with him. I think his fan club has caught up with him before he could get here. I think he'll be here in a minute. Go right ahead.
Sure. And by that time, let me introduce you to the discussants for this much awaited session. As the first discussant, we are elated to invite Rima Hooja ji. She is the member of Society for Culture and Environment. She is also an archaeologist and historian. जी हाँ, तालियों से उनका अभिनंदन होना चाहिए, बिल्कुल. She is also the director, MSMS, Museum City Palace, Jaipur, director, Jaigarh, managing trustee, Jaipur Virasat Foundation, and a fellow Royal Asiatic Society and vice president of ICOMOS, India. Formerly member, National Monuments Authority. Her book include Maharana Pratap, Crusader for Self-Rule, Rajasthani Stories Retold, and History of Rajasthan. And her latest book is on Amer's Raja Man Singh. मैं चाहूँगा तालियों से हम उनका स्वागत करें इस मंच पे. And as the second discussant for the day, we are happy to invite to the dais Savita Raje ji. Savita Raje ji is an architect with specialization in landscape architecture. She has been teaching for the last 34 years at the Maulana Azad Institute, National Institute of Technology, Manat, Bhopal, including 4 years as professor at the School of Planning and Architecture. She was the UNESCO expert for heritage issues of Madhya Pradesh and was invited as a trainer cum resource person for the Indian Mayor Study Tour to France in 2008. And she was also the issue editor for the theme Historic Urban Landscapes, and the list goes on. We are so delighted to have you, and finally we have the man of the moment, Professor Christopher Charles Benninger with us. And I would request the ladies and gentlemen to please unfold the conversation. Yes.
We don't have 3. So, no, it's all right. Put it on. We are getting a little cozy while we start it off. And I'm going to hand this over to Savita ji in a minute anyway, because Professor Benninger already has his mic, and he's got his local fan club. We are so excited to have students here, all the architecture students, but we are equally excited to have a lot of other visitors at the end of a very exciting day, and we have more of a very, very exciting, interesting conversation to follow. I think I'm just taking on the role of a moderator. I'm the fish out of water here. I'm not an architect, though I have dabbled in things to do with heritage, including getting the World Heritage City of Jaipur inscribed, but I was not the only one doing it. Savita ji is from Bhopal. She knows a lot more about this area. And of course, the professor. Yes, I know. I will be calling you Christopher in a minute. But the professor is well known across the country. He is in India now. He might look like a Gora. You can't help that. He can't help that. But anyway, we do want an exciting journey of where he started off from, with a father, I believe, who taught economics. And here you are teaching and reaching out. So I'm going to hand over this very precious mic to Savita ji.
Is it
Good
working?
evening, everyone. I think with Professor Benninger here, he should have the first word. So please, everyone is waiting to listen to you.
See, I believe Mr. Ramprasad, my colleague, has prepared in about 8 minutes of some pictures of my work. Many of you may not know my work at all. Can we put the pictures on? Something started. Technology usually does not work when I'm around. But anyway, this will give you some idea. I can't see whether it's...
We're still looking at ourselves.
Okay. See, let me talk something while I'm waiting for the technology. There are people here who are great scholars. They know Sanskrit. Who knows, some people might even know Persian because they're historians and they went to read old documents, no? But we architects have another language. It's called reading plans. We can visit a place like Bhimbetka and we read something there, even though the archaeologists say that there's no one who would know the language they spoke. But when we go there, and we would say, go up and see the auditorium cave, and we would go inside and see that there's a cross east, west, north, south axis now. We might even start making a hypothesis that the people of Bhimbetka knew something about cosmic figures, about the cosmological theories of the universe, which we see passed down now today even into modern buildings where architects try to have mandala-like structures now. Or we might see in front of that auditorium cave, there's a big rock, sort of vertical stone. Well, I might say that's a primordial column like Ashoka used. And I might imagine that from in front of the main cave, there were communities of hundreds of shelters made of stone. And each hill, there were 7 hills there, might have its own vertical stone, which related to the main stone. And then maybe a house like we have in Maharashtra, we have these small trees in front of the house. And we worship Krishna and different gods in front. There might have been something in front of each stone house. But we know in each stone house, in many of them, there were murals on the ceiling. Now, those murals on the ceiling had to do with the story of civilization. The murals on the ceiling started off with animals, then women with children, then people dancing, then horses came in with bows and arrows, i.e. war, then elephants. It means some sort of feudal society. So in a place like Bhimbetka, we might start reading a history of civilization, and I think that's why architecture is so important, because it's the footprint of something which I'll call civilization. This morning, the maps, the discussion of maps, he was talking about democracy, about self-respect, about everybody participating. To me, civilization is the process of going from hunter-gatherers who used to kill each other, fighting to get who gets to have the animal to take home, to moving into communities. So if I look at Benninger, I see the first community. It's a big community. It has the auditorium hall. It has some idea of an image of the universe. It has paintings which talk about first animals, nature. To me, Benninger is a place to build with nature. We're going to talk about sustainability today, but it's a highly nature kind of place. But what it says to me more than anything is that early Indian civilization started in places like this. And civilization is where people come together and jointly make decisions instead of killing each other. Let me put it in short forms now. So you can read footprints of civilization done by people who build buildings. They may not have been architects. They may be, if you go to Sanchi, Ashoka had an idea of a civilization. He had an idea in his edicts of ethics, of governance, of people coming together and doing something as a whole. And so I think architecture is the artifacts. It's our history of civilization, and by civilization I mean caring for each other. And I mean working as a community instead of working materialistically as individuals. So to me, that was the theme at Benninger, it was the theme at Sanchi, and it's the theme of our talks here today. and what we're all interested in, particularly in a society which is turning more materialistic, more money-oriented. We're interested in a society which is a continuation of the growth of civilization. So I think perhaps some pictures of my
I
work.
think there's still a little hitch, and I think we would love to keep hearing from you till the slides should start.
Okay.
And while you are, I just want to add that you can go back beyond Bhimbetka also. I'm an archaeologist who doesn't practice anymore, so I call myself a lapsed archaeologist. But when you look at early stone shelters, even without the paint, when you look at open sites where what you will find are remains maybe of post holes, not even that sometimes. You know, a post hole means there was a post. It supported something. Communities were there. They were perhaps still killing themselves, because you can have nuclear bunkers where people do that. But I think it is the idea that the professor is talking about, that you want a society that is caring. You want a community. Maybe society is a different word. Maybe you didn't want to, go that way. And most of the architecture that we see around us, if you were to look at it with those eyes, it's much more than just a shelter. It's got so many ideas to it. So when you first discovered Indian architecture physically, like by being here, not by studying about it, or maybe we even go back to when you were studying about it, was there a kind of universality to what you were looking at?
See, I'll answer her question after one more point, because I'm confessing now. I'm writing a book called The Story of Architecture, main letters, small letters, an Indian narrative. And why am I writing this book? Because I own about 150 books on the history of architecture in India. None of them cover the whole spread. Most of them are on the Cholas, are on Vijayanagara, or on the Deccan, but nobody writes about the entire history of architecture. It's in parts now. And there are 3 books I have which were written by British people. They all cost around 5,000 or 6,000 rupees each, but just 3 of them. 2 of them were written by colonialists, and one by a very good author about 25 years ago. But all of these books you read by foreigners, do you know what they tell us? They tell that the Indus Valley civilization was an offshoot of Mesopotamia and Egypt. Mesopotamia particularly. Now, in recent history, there is a site west of the Indus River, I'm trying to pronounce it correctly, called Mahargarh. Do you know Mahargarh is pre-Mesopotamian? It means, and they're digging it up, and they're finding footprints, again I'm reading footprints, which are similar to Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and even Lothal in Gujarat. So it means that the civilization that people are telling that came from outside into India actually came from India and went outside to Mesopotamia. No doubt there were exchanges in civilization in all times. We learned things from them, they learned from us, but it did not start in Mesopotamia and come here. I know the origin of Sanskrit is a huge debate, and I'm not an archaeologist or a linguist now, but I always say Latin is the language of the church in Italy. It started in Italy. Greek is the language of the Athenians. It started in Athens. Sanskrit is the language of the Hindu culture here. Obviously, it comes from India. No matter what people tell me about coming from the Arctic Circle and worshiping fire in the Arctic Circle, which to me is a ridiculous concept because it's too cold to worship fire there. But anyway, I'm not the man to talk about that, but I am the man to say that people have been saying that things come from outside into India, when in fact it was the other way around.
Yes.
In fact, it was the other way around. I think I'll let my friends.
Christopher G is like his language is of architecture, but he is a person who has been writing books and they are going bestsellers. So he is an author of letters plus an author of designs. I think before we proceed with the discussion, if you can run through some of his projects, so it will set the base for our discussions. Are you going to run through the projects?
There's a little hitch, which is why...
Okay.
There's a little hitch with technology, there always is.
Okay.
It's always the best laid plans. I drop my phone all the time.
So let us
let
start
ma'am
with
ask
the
questions.
discussion. So things will unfold with our discussions. So one of his
You're coming to
bestseller books is
On to-
Letters to a Young Architect. And in that, Christopher G., I will call you Christopher
Yes.
G., sounds
Okay.
good. You have raised concern about values. In an environment of effeteness and mercantile mindset, it would be great if you can cite your own design and planning process where you dealt with this issue and emerged, of course, a winner.
See, the book, Letters to a Young Architect. No? Fortunately or unfortunately, I wrote it as an architect. If you read it, it's about architecture, yes. It's about philosophy, yes. It's a very general book. Unfortunately or fortunately, it came in the top 10 best-selling books in India. Now, what happens is, you're an architect, but then your book becomes in the top 10. Suddenly people say he's an author, which I'm really not an author. I have written chapters in other books, and Ram Prasad and I have done a book with Skira in Italy and also Rizzoli in Manhattan. But basically, I do architecture. And I think the two questions, your question and her first question, why did I come to India? Did I find anything in India? So let me tell you some, if I can remember them, some principles. Now, I think if you look at all my buildings, whether it's my own India house or whether it's Suzlon One Earth, I don't know, since we don't have pictures, you wouldn't know them, but let me tell you, every project I do has an interior open space. At India House where I work, we were influenced by what is called wadas. Wadas is like a haveli. It's an ancient building form from India where you enter through a gate. Our gate is actually from a about 250-year-old Haryanvi wood-carved gate that you enter into India House. You come into a courtyard. There's a Nandi outside. And the Nandi outside tells people that there's likely to be a Shiva inside. No? So when you come into the central courtyard through the gate, you look straight on to a statue of Shiva, which is an old statue which we saved. No? So the house, India House, is actually a kind of a analogy of an ancient format of a house, that you enter through a gate, you have a Nandi, you have a Shiva, a courtyard, house is on the right, office is on the left, and old houses had something called a kota, where you stored things in the basement. Our basement is an art gallery. So what we're storing in the basement is artwork. We have exhibitions, there's a small auditorium there. So this multi-use project, Indian cities, Indian buildings were always multi-use. When the British came, they said, no, we'll separate white people from black people. We'll separate men from women. We'll separate amongst the white, the high officers and the low. And the same thing with the Indians. No? We'll separate. So town planning today all over India is actually based on a model I call the cantonment model. So when people are designing cities around the world, they were interested in cantonments built in India. And there was a gentleman, Wilkinson, who came to India I think sometime in the 1870s now, and visited all the cantonians. And he went back, and he was one of the people who started the Green Cities movement, the Garden Cities movement. Garden Cities movement, in my opinion, came from cantonment cities in India, very undemocratic cities, very plots were too big to be affordable. Roads were too long, plots were too big, so the pipelines and the water lines and the electric lines are all spread out. And it made the ability to pay for cities of people impossible. It would be very difficult for anyone in this room, including myself, or some of the richest people here, to ever be able to afford to buy a plot in Chandigarh. Even apartments there, people are moving out to Moholi and other suburban areas now, because our planning is being copied from Western models, and it's not being developed out of our ancient models. If you go to Ahmedabad city, what are called poles, neighborhoods with a gate, a courtyard inside, a private water supply. I hear some music. I wonder whether it means it's related to.
No, it will take time. Yeah.
It's background for you till we get the images.
Well,
No, we will proceed with the
Okay.
discussions.
Okay. Okay, if I get into my buildings, then every building, forget a choke in a wada. If you go to United World College of India, there's a central garden. All the classrooms, you walk around a covered passageway and around an open garden. There are no vehicles allowed into the campus. Even if you go to a very large campus I've designed in Bangalore, it's still, half of its phase 2 is under construction now. You'll find there are no automobiles. There are no vehicles now. So separating vehicles from walkers, from pedestrians, that's one of the principles. Having internal big green spaces, that's another principle. Making rooms, like at the Benninger College, where you go into a classroom, and one whole wall is French windows that slide open, and you go into either a green courtyard through a veranda, or you have views out into the mountains. No? So connecting room by room with nature, having a nature open space in the middle, to me that's a principle. Another principle is to use natural materials as far as possible. Like, I don't know whether you would know my project for my own institute, Center for Development Studies, or the Benninger College. It's made out of local basalt stone. It's made out of tile roofs, handmade tile roofs, or even small industries who make tile roofs in the Mangalorean area. It's all local materials that you'll find in all the villages around the college now. So using natural stone, having the rooms open into nature, having a central green space. Human scale is another very important thing. A lot of the buildings we see, they want to be monumental. They want to make people feel small. And they want the institution like Reserve Bank of India or some college, they want the college to look huge and the students to look small. I think this was something gifted to us by the British. I do love Luchen's Delhi, but it's very foreign. It's not very Indian.
Yeah.
And we should be seeking an Indian architecture.
Yeah, that's very right. So you have been an ardent advocate of context, historical and cultural context, and you just now talked about the context, how it goes missing in some projects. Your designs have been trying to increasingly dilute the division between the built and the unbuilt. Can you please tell us about your experience in the inclusion of the landscape context?
See, Professor, I'll call her Professor. She
No,
wants to
don't
call
call
me
me
Professor.
Professor.
See, we discussed this just before the meeting. And to me, it's like a conflict of almost a war of cultures which is coming to India. The culture of money and materialism, owning things, owning the most expensive car, having the biggest house, having lots of jewelry, versus a culture of celebrating life, of loving people, of community, and basically being human. So I think this clash of culture comes first in big cities like Bangalore, Bombay, Pune, maybe Ahmedabad, Hyderabad, Delhi, where you have land prices shooting up so high that you need to do vertical buildings, and those buildings can't be built out of basalt stone and they can't have Mangalore tiles now. So by necessity, you wind up having buildings which are steel and concrete, glass, aluminum. Now, somehow I don't think this is bad because times change. We're not living in the age of the Peshwas or of the Rajputs who built Havelis, no? So we were given a project by a person called Abhishek Lodha. I think Abhishek would be one of the, I think he's the biggest builder today in India. But what I found was, even though people would say, oh, he's a Marwadi, he's a builder, he just wants to make money, when we did a project called Lodha Belmondo, where there are about 3,500 apartments in 32 towers, 22 floors each now, we found we could work with Mr. Lodha and say, okay, we're going to do towers, but we're on a riverfront, and Pune is a city of 5 rivers. Can we make this project, A, celebrate rivers, B, can we have as much open space as possible? And he said, well, how much do you think we could have? I said, I think we can get 65% open space. He said, how would you do that? We can have footprints of towers, which may take 10% of the space. Because we have towers and not spread out row houses and cottages, we can reduce the area of roads to, say, 9%, and maybe parking will take another 15% or so. And that would leave us 65%, so we left 70 meters set. I think that was one of the materialists, one of the cash-rich developers. But anyway, we could convince Mr. Lodha to have a riverfront park, a central park, pocket gardens for older people and children, and come up with a project which is now, I would say, I don't mind saying, it is the most popular project in Pune. It is the most popular place to live because people can come home at night, they can go on long walks. The longest walk is 2.5 kilometers. They can do 2 rounds and do 5 kilometers. They can play tennis. They can go boating in the river because we've made it possible to go boating. And they can do all kinds of things which communities do. So rather than buying an apartment, they're actually buying a community. So it is possible to work with builders. If you've got a person who's sensitive, like Abhishek Lodha, you can do projects which are sensitive and not so materialistic, even though the objective of the project is clearly to make a profit. So as an architect, we have to sometimes walk on a tightrope, carrying, the balance on one side is profit. Is this working? One side is profit, and one side is what we want to accomplish, humanism. Okay, now this may be working better. Yeah. So to me, yes, there's a problem of balancing materialism with nature, with community. To me, community is more important even. But I think it can be done, and I think that's what it means to be a professional. You see, sometimes people say, what does it mean to be an architect? I said, it means a professional. Well, what's a professional? A professional is a person who does what? Professes values, and professes those values through practice.
Pushing them through class. What you said about communities
Not what
is I think very important, and also what you said about space and maximizing the minimizing the built footprint is what you did for one project. I mean, that was a decision you took so that you could have the maximum of open space. Is this something you would advocate for people to use their brains but also think of nature?
I think so. The architect of this complex was a very dear friend of mine, Charles Cray. And when he built this, he knew he was building on a slope. If it had been another architect, they might have done a big box and said, this is a museum, this is a cultural center. But here there's courtyards. You know that you're going down a hill. You can go down to the bottom and you have beautiful views of the lake. So I think there's a lot of an attempt here to even though there's a big footprint, to integrate it with nature and to make people feel they're part of nature, even though you're in a very large complex of auditorium, lecture halls, a library, etc. So to me, that is the challenge, and I think we can do it. And I think you have good teachers like this professor sitting next to me, and that's what we should be talking about.
And since there are so many students here and who are working, like they give lot of importance to walkthroughs and SketchUps and all that. So here is Christopher G, who is giving a lot of importance to the plan. Like Le Corbusier had also said, plan is the generator. And whatever I have seen the works of Christopher G and read about him, he has been giving a tremendous importance to the plan, and the plan being the chief director of the projects. Please do tell us about a plan or plans where you could actually incorporate all your beliefs and design aspirations, social responsibility, because he has been talking and doing a lot of work on social responsibility, like the work he just told you right now. The plan that makes you smile, a smile of contentment. I think he has already said.
No, but I would like to comment, you see, again, to all of us in India, Le Corbusier is almost like a saint. But if you look at Le Corbusier's work, you wouldn't probably have a good, but his famous building, Villa Savoye, it's a house which is on stilts, it's painted white, all white, and they've cut down all the trees in a forest, and it sits in a lawn like a statue. It's anti-nature. It says, like the Parthenon sits on a mountain overlooking Athens, and it says it's sky, what I call sky god worship. It's a very male kind of culture, no? Where ideas are what are important. But if you look at a lot of the indigenous architecture, rock houses, I'm not talking about ancient ones, I'm talking about in Italy, or in America, the indigenous people, or even come up to Frank Lloyd Wright. I think those are what I would call earth goddess worshippers. Frank Lloyd Wright loved nature. He built a famous house where a small river runs under the house and there's a waterfall. It's called Falling Water. It's probably his most famous building. So there are people who build abstractly, a very intellectual kind of architecture, but it's really not architecture that deals with nature. So coming back to the plan, you can do plans which are beautiful. I love Le Corbusier's plans, but they're geometrically beautiful, but they are an insult to nature. I feel if you're doing plans, you start with the site. You don't start with the building program, the functions, and the structural system. You start with the site, and you find out which are the assets of the site. I'm doing a project which looks at the Bay of Bengal now. So that side of the site is full of assets now. The front part of the site, there's a sort of a dirty road. That's a liability. So I study the site, I look at the contours first. Then the contours tell you a secret about water, about how rain falls and where the water goes now. So one of the questions you ask, if I'm going to put concrete and asphalt and roads on top of this site, how much percolation am I stopping of water into the earth? And am I going to cover the whole site with concrete and asphalt? So all the water goes into somebody else's property, and the next thing you know, you have erosion and you have flooding and you have siltation of the nearby rivers now. So plan starts with the plan of the site, with the contours of the site, with the stormwater on the site, with the assets of the site, views and soft edges, no? Hard edges which are ugly and noisy. And so I would say when you start doing a plan, first thing is the site. Then you might look at, is that site have any historic precedents, no? Like India House, if you look at and look at a plan of a wada or a haveli, you'll see that we learned from ancient urban architecture in India how to do a plan. Or if you look at United World College, on the contrary, it's up on a mountaintop, a hill 300 feet high. And the plan was generated by looking at local native rural buildings all around, farmhouses built by people in the Western Ghats, forts, farmhouses. No? If you go to Bhutan, and if you look at the plan for the Supreme Court, there are 4 lower courts, and the highest court where all the Supreme Court justice and his 4 assistants, they each have their own court for lower cases now. You'll see the plan comes from something called a chorten. If you look at the Supreme Court of Bhutan, you'll see what I call the culture of construction. Culture of construction means the materials come from the place, the labor comes from the place, and the project management comes from the place. When I built in Bhutan, my project managers were monks. They were people who could work with carpenters, with masons. They could mix colors out of minerals and make local colors now. When I work in Ahmedabad, say Pune, in a big factory, the factory is not made out of stone and wood and painted material. It's made out of steel, aluminum, glass, because Pune is a steel city. We make automobiles, we make train engines, we make airplane parts, we make machines of all types now. So the culture of Pune is an industrial city, and the management will be people like colliers, and Tatas will do the management, and the contractors are not local laborers, they're people from Bihar, UP, Odisha are the plumbers, no? Rajasthan sends the masons, no? So, and carpenters come from Gujarat. So depending on the building you're doing, it affects the kind of materials you use. The culture of construction is depending on where you're working. And if you use the culture of construction in Bhutan, the buildings will look like some Bhutanese monks have designed it. It will not look like Christopher Benninger designed it. Many people said, oh, your work in Bhutan, it doesn't look like you at all, it's not modern. I said, but it is modern. A Supreme Court is a very modern idea. Unless you have a democracy and a constitution, you don't have a Supreme Court. So I said the buildings are very modern, but for a traditional culture with a a culture of build, a culture of construction. So these ideas, culture of construction, I think, whether we're clients or whether we're students, we should all be aware of that.
Thank you. Like I have also been exploring into a lot of traditional architecture, and in my explorations into the living architectural and landscape heritage, I have found an inherent agelessness, timelessness, and flexibility in the spatial designs. Would you consider these aspects relevant to sustainable architecture and your own design experience with these aspects?
See, I must admit that you're a true professor. You ask the most difficult questions ever, and if you're her student and you clear the exams, congratulations to you. She must be preparing brilliant people. So, you know, her question deals with so many things. It deals with, there are different types of sustainability. There's in nature sustainability. When you're building, like when I do a city plan, like I did the capital plan of Bhutan, Thimphu. You know, the city was already growing. It had a very small population. It's quadrupled since I did the plan. But I looked at sustainability. What I was talking to you about is paving. I found rich people were taking plots and actually paving the whole plot. They would have 4 cars, so they needed to park 4 cars at the entry. Their house was big, and when they went outside the living room, they had a courtyard and they had a paved barbecue place, and probably 70% of the plot was paved now. So environment there to me meant urban environment. How do you stop these guys from paving on the hillside, and then by the time you come down to the Wangchu River, all the water from the whole hillside is going and carrying whatever loose soil it can, and it's filtering the river. So the river, which used to be deep, is becoming shallow, and if it becomes shallow, the same water is coming through the same section, so it's widening on the edges, it's deteriorating the edges of the river, and it's flooding. Why? Because we people, we planners, we urbanists, we architects are doing something upstream in every plot to destroy the river, and then people say, hey, climate change, we have floods now. I say, no, it's not climate change, it's the change up here in our brains. People in Bhutan never built houses like that. They never thought like that. Now, there's other sustainability. I was once asked to look at 3 new towns in Malaysia. 3 new towns for what they call the Bumi Putra. Bumi Putra means the local people, because that's a Sanskrit word, no? And Malaysia is a Sanskrit derivation. Kuala Lumpur is, see, they have an ancient culture which was brought from India there. Now, these 3 new towns had plots for farm workers which were 10,000 square feet. Towns with plots 10,000 square feet. It means the pipelines, the road lines, the electric lines, the sewage lines were humongous, very long, because to attach all these plots together, you needed a big network. What it meant was, and then the price of the land went up as the towns developed. The people they were designed for could not afford to live there. This was an uneconomically sustainable project. It meant that you would have to give central donations or central money every year to maintain the sewage systems, etc., because the local people would never be able to maintain that kind of a sustainable system. So we don't talk about this, but there's something called economically sustainable design also. So you have nature, you have economy, affordability, and then you have something called culture and history, which you're interested in. No? When I came to Pune, there were 350 wadas, havelis, built during the time of the Peshwas. They were still there in 1975, 76. Today there would not be more than 20 left. They've been torn down. Builders have built ugly, I must say they were probably the ugliest projects I've ever seen, covering 50, 60% of the site. So culture is something we're also destroying. We're destroying affordability, we're destroying nature, we're destroying culture. And all of these things, when we talk about sustainability, we have to get out of the rut that we only think sustainability has to do with nature. No, it has to do with civilization. It has to do with everything. So,
Before Professor Savita ji comes with her next question, I want to sneak in one of mine.
okay.
And that is, you've been practicing, but you've also been teaching. And I won't want to say I don't want to use the word reinventing, but how much of your learning have you been tossing out each time and learning new and sharing that with students? Because it's a journey, right?
Right.
And you're still only halfway through that journey. My end question is going to be next 20 years, next.
Yeah. See, I'm still young.
Exactly.
I just turned 80.
Yeah.
So,
I know that, which is why I said it's.
and I have to think about the next 50 years. I finished 50 years of practice. So what am I going to do? What I've started telling students is, before you design any building, take a sketchbook and write myself. Redesign yourself. Write a sketch of yourself inside. What do you want to be like? What does it mean to be a professional? Do you want to be honest? Or do you want to make quick money? Do you want to lie to people and tell them that your dad owns a big Audi or a Mercedes-Benz? I know a lot of people doing that. I know people in Pune who get picked up at the airport in very expensive Mercedes-Benz, but then they drive into very small rented houses, but they want people to see them land at the airport in a big car, and everybody thinks, wow, he must be a very successful professional. Actually, he's getting kickbacks from suppliers as an interior designer. And he can't even spend that money because it's black money. He doesn't have a PAN card for that. So write a sketchbook of yourself. Design yourself. I think part of your design is don't run and start a business 1 year after you graduate. I know students in Bombay who graduate and open an office the same day. And they wind up doing the rest of their life cheapo interior design projects where they're making a lot of money on kickbacks from vendors, kickbacks from carpenters, from glass merchants, from 1,000 types of materials you buy as an interior designer. And that's the way they're making money. That's not professional. They should have redesigned themselves before they started a practice, and looked at things like honesty, working with nature, building communities, doing social work. You know, some of the young architects were telling me during the COVID that we don't have anything to do. So I said, well, what we've done in our firm, we've taken one of the oldest hospitals in India, built by the British, Sassoon Hospital in Pune. It's a big hospital. David Sassoon donated the big building there back in the 1850s. And we've said, and this was now more than 1 million square feet of junk. It's run by the state government. We said, we are going to do an architectural audit of some 30 buildings on 6 different city plots. We're doing an audit. Which buildings should be torn down? Which buildings have the wrong use? Why are dead bodies being kept where patients are being kept? Why is there no morgue? Why is this? Why is that? Why are outpatients coming in areas where people have highly contagious diseases now? So we did an audit, and then we listed problems, and we worked with the doctors, and we came up with a new master plan. And the interesting thing is we published a small document on that master plan during the COVID, in which case Ram Prasad got COVID, I got COVID, my driver got COVID, we all got COVID, but we actually could do a service to society. And the government of Maharashtra at that time earmarked 100 crores immediately to implement some of the ideas which we came up with. So I said, you don't need to have a client. You don't need to have a client. Take the road in front of your office now. Just do a design for the road in front of your office. Try to put some footpaths. Try to make it someplace for people to park. But mainly footpaths. In Pune, we don't have footpaths. Even though the Smart Cities program, if you see the Smart Cities program, we need footpaths and they're not coming. The problem is that they ask questions and then I do what I want to do. So I hope they're not getting frustrated as question asked.
No, not at all.
Maybe we need to also start asking them questions in a while, but I'll let the professor.
So the next one is a little bit different question. Once a journalist had asked Pandit Hari Prasad Chaurasia ji that where would he like to settle in his next birth. So he immediately said Pune, Maharashtra. So you have been to most parts of the world and most parts of India, and you have you are the founder of the School of Planning at CEPT Ahmedabad. What made you decide to settle in Pune, in Maharashtra? What made you decide Pune as your karma bhumi? What made you zoom down to Pune?
See, actually, I love Hari Prasad's music. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. But actually, this question was asked to me in my last life. And I said, well, actually, in the previous life, I lived in India, and I want to be, my Bhumi Karma should be back in India. So I first came to Ahmedabad to work with Doshi, and he was very kind to me, a great guru, a great teacher. And he asked me as a youngster at age 28, I had done a master's degree at Harvard in architecture, had taught there for 2 years, and meanwhile, parallel was doing a degree in planning, which I got. So he said, you have a planning degree. Why don't you quit your job at Harvard? I said, but it's a 10-year track assistant professorship. My father's a professor, he'll kill me. Anyway, come back to Pune and start the School of Planning, which I did at age 28. Now, thank you, my dear. Thank you, you're hired. See, the point is now that I love Ahmedabad, but Ahmedabad doesn't have any mountains, doesn't have an ocean. I can't drink a peg at night. There's so many things about Ahmedabad I love. The people I love. There's wonderful people I know. But I made a trip to Pune in 1972 when Pune was a little different than it is today. And I could look up at the hills in the evening. Mist was coming over the hills. Mist. Beautiful, clean, misty air. And there was greenery on the hills now. And I could walk down and sit with some well-known actors used to come to Pune and have a glass of beer. And there were a lot of intellectuals there. Another thing, it was a cantonment town. Now, cantonment towns are interesting because they're cosmopolitan. They have people from all parts of India. So it was an all-India kind of a city. And then it had ancient culture because you should know that Pune was the home of the Peshwas. It was not the British who finished off the Mughals. It was the Marathas who finished off the Mughals. The British just won some battle in Bengal. And then after the Panipat War in 1761, the Marathas were weak and people took advantage. But by that time, the Marathas were not fighting the Mughals then. They'd already beat the Mughals. They were fighting an Afghan army. The War of 1761, that man is a dangerous man standing at the mic. So my point is that Pune had history, it had culture, it had cosmopolitanism. It was a very free city. And I lived under a great banyan tree in Ahmedabad called Balkrishna Doshi, a person I love, and I pray for his health. And but I thought, I can't stay under the banyan tree. I have to go do something on my own. You want to say something?
Yes, I want to interrupt you. So sorry for that. But yes, it was wonderful to listen to your past life as well as present life as well. I would be requesting you, with your permission, should we open the round for the audience?
One more question. Just one more question.
Yes. I would request you to please keep it short.
No, just a quick question. We want to know Professor Christopher Charles Benninger as a person. Which is your favorite animal, bird and plant? Or maybe which of these you have thought of consciously when you were designing?
See, I already told her this is a very personal question. My favorite animal is the human being. I love humans, no? Okay? All birds are beautiful for me. I find it very difficult to choose one bird over another. But, to escape her question, I was going to talk now. He's going to get angry. I was going to talk. She said personal about you. When I was young, I was an adventurer. I'll tell you what I mean by adventure. I came to India overland, from London to Bombay, overland, on state transport buses, on hitchhiking, on anything I could get. I crossed Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and all these places I traveled. I rode a bicycle another time from Paris all the way to Athens because there was a seminar. I wanted to attend Athens, but I couldn't afford to fly there. So I bought a bicycle, and 1,500 kilometers with my roommate in college. I went from Paris all the way through a communist country, Yugoslavia. First time I went to a communist country, but I went overland. So this kind of thing I did 5 or 6 times, and I think that's my personal life. I like to adventure. That's why I'm in India. And I also like taking a little risk now and then, like attending this Lit Fest.
You're taking another risk, but a risk you would love, which is opening it out to the audience.
Of course, Rima ji ने पहले कहा था that he might seem to be a Gora, but he is very much अपने वाला. Yeah, amazing session. Any question from the audience? Please raise your hand. Yes. Anyone?
Also a student.
Yes.
Exactly.
Mike, यहाँ पर. Yes.
Of editing theses for PhD students of architecture and planning mainly. And I have learned so much. As an 8-year-old, I used to read the New York Times section 8 on Sundays. And I can read a plan. I can make a plan. I have built a house, I have broken a house. I've done lots of things. But architecture, exactly as you defined it, because of community, because of the need for a human aspect that we want to live together. The example that you gave about Pune is very exciting. Unfortunately, I have to ask you, do you know that Charles Collier built a place in Delhi called Tara Apartments, where I have lived, my father has died. And that feeling of community is absent, and unfortunately, it has been built. People have closed the verandas and all these kinds of things. What is your idea to prevent this kind of modification which breaks the FAR in the kind of projects that you make?
Okay. I'm sorry to hear that you had one of the bad interactions with Charles's work. No, I'm just saying, you see what happens is, was it built by the DDA by any chance? No? Okay. Okay. I'm not sure if I heard correctly the name of the scheme. See, what you're asking is a question some of the other authors I think we're dealing with this morning. Our society is not a society. See, one of the first things I was told by a friend of mine when I came to India, a retiring ICS officer, Christopher, this is a very religious country. People are very spiritual, but we are not an ethical country. Don't get confused. Don't think because we're religious that we won't cheat here and there. Now,
Absolutely.
what you're talking about is, unfortunately, the further from the center to the state, the cities are the most corrupt places in India. To pass a plan, I tell in Pune we should have a published menu card. Per square foot, how much do you want to pass a plan? How much do you want to add a room? How much do you want to allow me to put an illegal structure on the balcony? Because people are taking money and turning their head away, and they're not seeing what's happening. So I wouldn't blame the architect for giving terraces. I would blame we need to work together to have a society, not just a community. Society means rules, regulations, respect, and neighbors. See, in our society, if my neighbor puts an illegal covering, well, I don't want to hurt his feelings. His wife may stop talking to my wife if I complain. No? So we turn the other way. While in America, people are tough. They call the municipal corporation. Who's allowed this, and who are you taking money from? Why is this happening? We need to be more tough as a society when it comes to our civil laws and civil order.
Thank you so much, sir. Next question from
Professor Christopher, can you suggest what is to be done about the Himalayan subsidence?
I'm really sorry, I couldn't hear that. The which incident?
Sir, can you please repeat?
The Himalayan towns which are disintegrating.
Disintegrate.
You mean because people are building dams up there? I'm not sure what you're talking about. Sir?
Do you suggest?
Please give the mic to the gentleman.
What do you suggest, Professor, to prevent such kind of things happening?
See, let me tell you. What I've told people, when Uddhav Thackeray was the chief minister and his son Aditya was environmental minister, we started doing a river development plan in the city. And everybody became an expert on rivers. And I said, well, first of all, we're starting at the wrong place. We need a river development plan. And the plan being done is pretty good considering whatever, because nothing is being done now. But the problem is not in Pune, it's up in the hills. We need what is called a macro watershed plan. We need to start at the crest where water goes off a hilltop one direction or the other direction. And then the micro watersheds, the little streams. Can we do things to reinforce those? Can we do nala bunding? Can we do all kinds of environmental work to stop flooding? And next thing, why the hell do we have to build huge dams in mountains now, which are going to cause earthquakes, which are going to cause siltation of rivers, which are going to destroy the environment? So again, we're not doing watershed planning, and I mean, first of all, start with the macro watershed of a huge valley region, and then the micro watershed, and do that, and then think, can you put a reservoir for drinking water for, say, Bombay or Delhi or something? Do you need a hydro project here? Can you do these things in a sensitive way? I think our whole thinking starts with small projects, and those small projects are ruining everything, but we don't have an overall master plan. Watershed planning is a must for the Himalayas. It's a must for the Western Ghats around Pune, but nobody's doing watershed planning at all.
Thank you so much, sir, for taking us through an amazing architectural journey. The member of Society for Culture and Environment to please come forward and present a memento to our author and discussants as a symbol of love and respect from the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival.
And we'll still ask the professor afterwards what are his teaching plans and his practice plans for the next 20 years. And I mean that because you're
Yes.
only as young as you feel, and he is young. 80 is just a figure.
Absolutely. Yes. There you go. Hai na? The memento is the mascot of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival. Yes, that calls for an applause. Thank you so much, sir, for being an amazing author and for sharing your valuable knowledge with us. And thank you so much to Rima ji and Savita ji for being amazing discussants and for carrying forward this interesting, rather insightful session. Please, तालियों के साथ अपना सपोर्ट भी सामने रखते जाएं. रीमा जी and Savita ji. Now, it's time for the last session of the day one of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival. Yes, there it is, the beautiful mascot of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival. Thank you so much, sir and dear ladies. Okay, audience.